Hello there, my name is Dryden. Today you are going to be watching an excerpt from my live stream on Twitch, where I am currently reading Irreversible Damage, The Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters by Abigail Shrier. This is a fascinating book with very good points, and today I'm going to be talking about cancel culture. What you're going to see from this video is that there was a lady who had a very good and a very scientific diagnosis of what's going on with transgender and why there is a 1,000% increase in the States and a 4,000% increase in UK of transgender females to males. We're going to be talking about that. I hope you like it. Was more than enough to touch a nerve. Activists stormed the Twitter page of PLOS ONE, the peer-reviewed scientific journal of Public Library of Science that had published Dr. Littman's paper, accusing her of anti-trans bigotry. There it is. There it is. They claimed that Dr. Littman had deliberately solicited parent reports from conservative, anti-trans parent groups. In fact, over 85% of the parents self-identified and supported LGBT rights. And that's the thing. You look at the sin of the world, and how bad it is and how much you want to help, and then you say, hey, this might be a problem, and then they say, you're a hater. What? She's a scientist. Journalists saw smoke and rushed over, flagons of gasoline in hand. A graduate student, self-described transgender advocate, in Dr. Littman's own Brown University department disparaged Dr. Littman in the press, calling her work shoddy, below scientific standards, and published an article accusing Dr. Littman of having been motivated by bias. Below scientific standards, she had 256 individual reports from different parents. That's a lot. Other transgender activists accused Dr. Littman of having hurt people with the paper. Oh my goodness. I can't say the word. They called her work dangerous and insisted that it could lead to worse mental health outcomes for trans-identifying adolescents. Brown University stripped of its own press release on her paper from its website and replaced it with an apology from the Dean of Public Health, who lamented the conclusions of the study could be used to discredit efforts to support transgender youth. PLOS ONE's editor-in-chief took the rare step of issuing an apology for not having provided better context for the research and promised an additional review into the possible methodological... Guys, I can't read these words. Methodological errors the paper might have contained. Dr. Littman's paper had already been peer-reviewed by 2 independent academics and 1 academic editor, but Brown and PLOS ONE knew a woke mob when they saw one. They decided it was best not to make any fast moves to slowly hand over their wallets. Diane Ehrensaft, a prominent child gender psychologist, told The Economist that Dr. Littman's use of parents' reports was akin to recruiting from the Klan or alt-right sites to demonstrate that blacks really were an inferior race. The Klan in this case were the parents who had simply been asked questions about their own children. Few cared that the surveyed parents had not expressed anti-transgender attitudes generally, but rather had expressed the disbelief and upset that their daughters had adopted this identity out of the blue, without any childhood history of gender dysphoria, and that following this identification, their adolescents' mental health seemed to get worse. Thus, Chris brought up the 50% suicide rate. None of the attacks acknowledged that the parent report is a standard method for assessing child and adolescent mental health. How else would you obtain the psychological history of a child if not from the parent report? Dr. Littman's paper became one of the most widely discussed academic articles of 2018. Her analysis and conclusions drew praise from some of the most distinguished world experts on gender dysphoria. Dozens of parents wrote to her to thank her for giving name to the phenomenon they are observing in their adolescents. But she was also widely tarred as a bigot and a bully. She wasn't right-wing or anti-trans. She had spent several years working part-time for Planned Parenthood, and with her husband, contributed several pieces to HuffPost on such topics as the rotten GOP approach to healthcare. These people who wrote this are as liberal as it gets, but even they were called bigots and bullies. But the truth no longer seemed to matter much. Psychology Today published an open letter from transgender-identified and cisgender allies with vast expertise in gender and sexuality, purporting to refute Dr. Littman's paper. The letter called her work methodological flawed for having relied on parental reports and unethical for having reached its conclusions. Imagine reaching a conclusion and considering that unethical. She didn't start with the conclusion. She found the conclusion and accused Dr. Littman of harboring overt ideological bias for having dared examine the cause of trans identification at all. Activist clinicians hunted Dr. Littman to the Rhode Island Department of Health, where she worked part-time as a physician consultant on projects related to the health of pregnant women and preterm infants. Her work there had nothing to do with transgender youth. It had nothing to do with young children or adolescents per se at all. Caring for preemies had been a passion of hers ever since she had given birth to a preemie of her own, just over 1 pound at birth. The activist denounced Littman to her employer, the DOH, claiming that she had written a paper harmful to transgender youth. They demanded that the DOH terminate its relationship with Dr. Littman immediately. Adding a dash of threat, the authors airily suggested that the DOH might add a gender-neutral restroom to its facilities to send a message to the community that trans and gender-diverse lives are valued by DOH. The activists wanted a head on a pike. The DOH gave them Dr. Littman's. Her paid consultancy was over. Honestly, this is kind of retarded because it's like, wow. People say it's not cancel culture. They say it's consequence culture. For doing a scientific study about the phenomenon of transgender, she loses her job? Who is this mob? Who is this mob? Who are they? And why do we let them walk all over us? Because it doesn't say who they are. It says activist clinicians, and the activist denounced her to her employer. Who are these activists and why are we listening to them? Do we need their business? Do we need their money? What are they going to do? Get mad on the internet? And then, oh no, you're going to lose business? I don't think that's going to happen. Stop apologizing. Defend yourself. Stop apologizing. I see it so often. I see so many people apologizing on Twitter. I don't even have Twitter, but I know it happens every week. They get canceled for something. Instead of defending themselves and saying, no, I stand by that, they lose their backbone and they say, I'm sorry. And then they lose their job. It's ridiculous that we're destroying careers over the most pitiful, tiny mistakes. Like, who was that? There was a country singer, Morgan Wallen. I don't know if you guys remember this. This was old news. This is like January news. Morgan Wallen, who is a country singer. This whole situation's crazy. I want you guys to understand what happened. In the video, which was obtained by TMZ, Wallen and his friends are seen arriving at his house after a night out. First of all, privacy. Who's filming them? Is the neighbor filming them? After honking horns and talking loudly, they garnered the attention of the neighbors. Okay, so they're being loud and rowdy, and then the neighbors come out, who start recording them, and then Wallen used the N-word to describe one of his drunken friends. So while drunk, he says the N-word to one of his friends, and then he comes out with an apology video. Because here's the thing. We want him to say sorry, and then we want him to lose his job. Because how dare you say that word? How dare you? How dare you say that word while you're drunk? I personally don't say that word. I'm not going to virtue signal to you guys because I'm going to do the opposite. I'm just as bad as everyone else. I'm just as much of a sinner as everyone else. And that's the great thing about Jesus, because Jesus forgives you. Jesus says, I see what you've done. I see what you're doing. I see the sin you're going to do in the future, and I forgive you. And then Romans 8:1, there is now therefore no condemnation for those in Christ Jesus. I'm not condemned. The woke liberal media crowd, there's no grace. There's no hope. You do something wrong, you sin in their eyes, you do something as much as saying one word with 6 letters and you lose your whole career? What? Are you kidding me? There's no grace. That's the best thing about Jesus, is the grace. Knowing that if I sin today, which guess what? I sinned today, and I sinned yesterday, and I sinned the day before. And Jesus said there's no condemnation, just follow me. But this crazy leftist activist crowd, they want their own twisted sense of justice. And they say, you have to lose your entire career. You have to apologize to us. Guess what? We're not going to accept that apology, but we want it anyway. Okay, Chris is saying the best thing is he's continued smashing records with his music. He should have never apologized. And that's what I'm saying. He should not have apologized. Apologize to who? He said it to his friend, so maybe apologize to his friend. But I have a feeling he said that in good faith to his friend, you know? And that's the thing is I've seen a lot is people get upset about the N-word, but a lot of people secretly say it to their own friends. But that's the point. That's what I'm talking about. Is this cancel culture is insane. You do a study with 256 parents talking about this phenomenon, this craze, this fad, and then you lose your job. This is why we're not going to heal from things if we can't even study things. That's the issue. If you can't talk about it, if you can't in good faith be scientific about it, you can't observe, come to conclusions after researching and studying, there's no hope. And then you look at the transgender community, 50% suicide rate, just as high as people with schizophrenia, just as high as people with schizophrenia. That's what's happening. Real quick, before you leave, I want to thank you for watching this video, but I do request that you subscribe and hit that bell notification because according to this very real statistic, only 1% of you are subscribed, and that's kind of low. So please subscribe, hit that bell notification, and help me out. It is tough out here for Christian conservatives.